So I was like, what? But then I heard all the other things like sexual harassment, and I was like, they're trying, well, I don't know what they're trying to do, but these are the types of things that the media can turn into something that it's not.
She was not always famous, and not many people believed she would become a star. Lizzo was just a little girl with a big voice, growing up in a world that often told her she didn't belong. She faced so many problems that most people would have given up. She was teased, ignored, and left out just because she looked different. But inside she had a dream that never stopped growing. As a child, she would sing in her room, hoping someone would hear her and understand her pain. Music was the only place where she felt free, where she could be herself without shame. Her parents didn't have a lot of money, but they always told her she could do anything if she worked hard. She believed them, even when life got hard. When she moved to a new city, she felt alone again. No friends, no family close by, just her thoughts and her music. But she didn't stop. She joined small music groups, played her flute, wrote songs, and tried everything to be seen. For years, nobody paid attention. She performed in small bars, on tiny stages, often for free. People walked past her without clapping. Still, she kept going. She cried in secret but smiled in public. She believed that one day her voice would matter. And slowly, something started to change. One of her songs went viral. People began to notice her energy, her confidence, and her message. She told women to love themselves, to be proud no matter what the world says. Her songs were not just music, they were like messages of hope for people who felt invisible. Suddenly, magazines wanted to feature her, talk shows invited her, and big music labels offered her contracts. But she didn't forget where she came from. She still talked about her pain, her body, and how hard it was to survive in an industry that expected her to look perfect. She refused to change who she was. People called her brave, strong, powerful. She became a symbol of confidence and self-love. Fans cried when they met her. Young girls said she saved their lives. Even when critics made fun of her, she laughed and danced. She was winning awards, topping charts, and becoming a voice for the ones who felt left out. Behind the scenes, her team grew, her dancers traveled with her, and her name was everywhere. But while the world saw a queen rising, very few knew the pain that followed her like a shadow. In every smile, there was a hidden memory of rejection. In every laugh, there was a silent fear that everything could fall apart. She worked hard, maybe too hard, to prove she belonged. And with each new fan, each show, each headline, the pressure grew. She was no longer just a singer. She was now a movement. People didn't just watch her, they expected her to be perfect, kind, strong, and always smiling. But no one asked how she was feeling. No one looked behind the curtain. And slowly things began to change. Small things, tiny cracks, whispers, a dancer quitting, a strange tweet, a cancelled appearance. But the world was too busy cheering to notice. Lizzo had become a star, but stars carry weight, a weight most people can't see. And as her fame grew louder, the silence behind it grew darker. There was something building in the shadows, something the cameras never caught. And soon, that silence would turn into a storm. But before it did, she stood in front of the world, smiling, glowing, larger than life. No one knew the truth was coming. No one knew how much it would hurt. And no one, not even Lizzo, could have imagined what would happen next. Lizzo was now everywhere, on every screen and every headline and every award show stage, but her rise to the top was not just about music. It was about what she stood for and how she made people feel. She wasn't like other pop stars. She didn't look like them, didn't dress like them, didn't try to be them. She was proud of her body, her voice, her truth. She told the world that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and that loving yourself is the loudest message anyone can share. She danced in outfits that many would never dare to wear, smiled in rooms where others had once mocked her, and sang with a power that made people stop and listen. People called her brave, a queen, a legend in the making. Young girls, especially those who never felt beautiful, looked at Lizzo and saw hope. They saw someone who didn't hide, someone who didn't shrink, someone who made being different feel like a superpower. She was not just singing songs. She was changing minds, healing hearts, and breaking rules. Her message reached every corner of the internet. She posted videos of herself working out, not to lose weight, but to show that health and beauty are not always about being thin. She laughed at the hate, embraced the love, and kept pushing forward. Her concerts were wild, powerful, emotional. People cried, danced, and held each other. She wasn't just a performer, she was a movement, and her fans followed her with unmatched loyalty. On Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, she was always real, always herself, and people loved her for that. She made them believe that being loud, proud, and full of life was not only okay, it was powerful. Behind her glittery outfits and catchy lyrics was a deep message of self-worth, and it made her different from anyone else in pop music. Brands wanted to work with her. TV shows invited her again and again. She won Grammys. Her songs went viral. Her face was on magazine covers. And she gave interviews where she spoke about mental health, body image, and love. She became more than a star. She became a symbol. A person people looked up to when they needed courage. But behind all the noise and flashing lights, there was something quieter, something not many people noticed. The louder her fame got, the more pressure she felt to always be the perfect example of strength. People expected her to smile every day, to be kind to everyone, to never mess up. She wasn't allowed to be tired or angry or human. And that's when the cracks began to form. It wasn't big at first, just a few stories online, a couple of dancers speaking out, rumors on small blogs. People began to wonder if the woman who shouted about love and kindness on stage was truly living by those words off stage. But every time something strange came out, it was quickly covered up by another performance, another joke, another viral moment. Her team worked hard to protect her image, to keep the dream alive. Still, some fans started asking questions. Was everything as perfect as it seemed? Could someone be that strong, that loving all the time? And if she wasn't, what was hiding behind the curtain? Fame has a strange way of changing people, and even stronger people can begin to bend under its weight. As Lizzo's fame grew bigger, so did her world. Her team, her responsibilities, her fans. Every day was packed with meetings, rehearsals, shows, photo shoots. She barely had time to rest. And when people are tired, when they're pushed to their limits, their masks can slip. But nobody wanted to believe anything bad. She had saved so many with her words, her music, her message. Why would she ever hurt someone? Why would someone who preached love ever be cruel? The truth was still hiding, waiting, growing, and it would take just one spark to bring it into the light. Because while she smiled on camera and danced on stage, something deeper was happening behind the scenes. Something that didn't match the happy songs and self-love speeches. A silence was building, and inside that silence, there were people with stories. People who once laughed her, but now felt different. People who were part of her world, but no longer clapped when she walked by. And slowly, those people were beginning to speak. Not in loud screams, but in quiet voices full of sadness, confusion, and disappointment. The kind of voices that can be ignored once or twice, but not forever. The image of Lizzo, the strong, bold, fearless woman, was starting to shake. And while millions still believed in her, still followed her, still played her music, there was now a shadow following her every move. A whisper in every room, a question in every fan's heart. What if the person we trusted to lift us up was hiding something darker? What if the face of kindness was just a mask? What if we were all wrong? These questions didn't have answers yet, but they were growing louder, and soon they would explode into the open, tearing apart the picture-perfect story the world thought it knew. Because behind every powerful voice, there's a hidden silence, and behind every hero, there's a truth we may not be ready to face. At first, everything still looked perfect from the outside. Lizzo was performing in sold-out arenas, dancing with joy, singing with power, and posting funny videos online that made fans laugh and feel loved. But if you looked closer, if you listened carefully, you could sense that something wasn't quite right. Something was shifting in the shadows behind all that fame. And it wasn't just the pressure of celebrity life, it was something deeper, something strange, something that made people who once loved her now feel uncomfortable in her presence, like they were walking on eggshells, scared to speak, scared to breathe too loud. And it began with whispers, soft at first, from people close to her. The kind of whispers that feel like secrets, too dangerous to say out loud. A dancer suddenly left the tour without saying much. Another one posted a message that sounded like pain but didn't explain why, and some fans thought maybe they were just tired or chasing other dreams. But others knew that when people start living without goodbye, there's usually a reason they're afraid to share. Still, the world didn't want to believe anything was wrong, because Lizzo had become more than a star. She was a symbol of joy, power, freedom, and to question her was like questioning hope itself. So the whispers stayed small, hidden under layers of glitter and loud music. But behind the scenes, the people working closest to her began to notice a different kind of energy, a heavy one, where smiles felt forced and backstage moments felt tense, where laughter didn't last long and kindness was only for the cameras. And some people said the way she treated her team was not what they expected, not what they had been promised. There were rumors about strange rules, about being pushed too far, about being told to act a certain way or be left behind. And some of her dancers started sharing stories, but not directly, not with names, just with hints and feelings that something behind Lizzo's brand of love wasn't loving at all. There was one moment, quiet and almost missed, when a former employee liked a comment online that questioned Lizzo's kindness, and fans went wild, wondering why someone who had once worked with her would agree with something like that. And that one tiny action opened a door that couldn't be closed, because now people were watching more closely, listening harder, asking new questions about what it's really like to work with a woman the world saw as a fearless leader of love and truth. And while no one wanted to believe their hero might have a darker side, the stories kept growing, not loud but steady, building like smoke before a fire. And some began to say that Lizzo was not always the woman she appeared to be on stage, that the speeches and songs were parts of the show. And when the lights went off, another side came out, one that didn't fit the image the public had come to love. And though no proof had come out yet, the tension was there, thick like a secret waiting to break. Because those close to her weren't smiling the way they used to, and some who had praised her before were now silent. And silence can sometimes be the loudest warning of all, especially in the world of fame, where silence often means fear. Fear of speaking the truth, fear of being called a liar. And so the public was left with questions and no answers, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, and with a growing sense that behind the queen of self-love might be a world of control, pressure, and power used in ways nobody wanted to admit. But even as fans began to feel uneasy, they held on to hope. Maybe it was all just gossip. Maybe people were jealous, maybe it was the cost of fame, but in their hearts, something felt off, and the feeling wouldn't go away. It sat like a weight, like a storm waiting to break open the sky. Because when enough people whisper, eventually the noise becomes impossible to ignore, and what had once been soft became louder each day, as more people began to wonder, who is the real Lizzo when the cameras are gone, and what happens behind the scenes when the lights go dark and the crowd goes home? And while the world waited for an answer, the silence behind her glittering image grew colder, heavier, and more dangerous, like a truth hiding just behind the curtain, ready to change everything. Then it happened, suddenly and without warning, like a crack in glass that had been waiting to break. The news came out, and it spread faster than anyone could imagine. Lizzo, the star who had told the world to love themselves, was now being accused of doing the very things she said she stood against. It started with a lawsuit, filed by 3 of her former dancers. And what was inside that lawsuit shocked everyone. The women said they had been mistreated, pushed too far, and forced to deal with things no one should have to face at work. They said Lizzo had created an unsafe, uncomfortable environment, one where they were judged not by their talent but by their weight, their choices, and their silence. The same woman who had once told others to embrace their bodies was now being accused of body shaming her own team. And for many fans, it felt like a nightmare. I'm like waking up to find out everything you believed in wasn't real. The lawsuit was not just about words or feelings. It included serious claims about sexual harassment, pressure, fear, and power used in the wrong way. One dancer said they were forced to do things during a trip to Amsterdam that made them feel embarrassed, confused, and scared. Things that should never happen between an employer and employee. And while some people tried to defend Lizzo, saying maybe the dancers were lying or just better, The lawsuit included so many details, and the women looked like they were carrying years of pain, not just anger. Their eyes showed betrayal, not revenge, and it made people stop and wonder what had really been going on behind all the music and dancing. The court papers described moments that felt more like a nightmare than a tour. Moments where they were treated more like objects than people, where saying no wasn't allowed, where smiling was a rule, and speaking up was a risk. Fans started sharing their thoughts online. Some were shocked, some were heartbroken, and some were angry. Not just at the accusations, but at themselves for believing in someone who might have been living a lie. Social media exploded with questions, videos, reactions, and news stories from people who said they had seen the same behavior before but were too afraid to speak out. It was like a wall had broken. Then all the secrets that had been hiding behind her fame were spilling out into the open. News outlets began covering it non-stop, analyzing every sentence of the lawsuit, replaying old interviews where Lizzo talked about love and kindness, now wondering if those words were just part of a carefully built image. And slowly the internet turned what was once a flood of love now became a storm of doubt. Every moment she had ever shared online was looked at with new eyes. People asked if she had ever really meant any of it, or if it had all been for fame. Some fans tried to hold on, saying they needed more proof that she was innocent until proven guilty, but others couldn't ignore what was in front of them. They felt hurt, tricked, and used, like they had followed a light only to discover it had a dark hidden flame. And in the middle of all this, Lizzo stayed quiet. At first, no statements, no videos, just silence. The kind that makes people even more suspicious. When she finally responded, it was with denial. She said the stories were not true, that she would never treat people that way, that she was being unfairly attacked. And while some believed her, many felt her words were too little, too late. The dancers stood by their truth and the legal process began, slow but serious. Now the courts will have to decide what really happened. But the damage had already been done. Her image, once so bright, now felt cracked, uncertain, and filled with doubt. People unfollowed her. Some brands distanced themselves. And for the first time in years, Lizzo's name wasn't being said with joy, but with confusion, hurt, and anger. The world was watching not to celebrate her, but to find out if she was a liar, a bully, or worse. And what made it even more painful was how sudden it all felt. How quickly someone could go from beloved to questioned, from celebrated to doubt. It reminded people that fame is powerful, but it's also fragile. One mistake, one hidden truth, one lawsuit, and the dream can fall apart. And for Lizzo, the woman who told the world to love itself, the truth was now something she could no longer hide from. The stage was quiet, the spotlight colder, and the silence around heavier than ever before. And in that silence, the world waited, not for a new song or a funny video, but for the truth, raw and real, to come out. After the lawsuit was made public and the world found out about the painful and shocking stories from Lizzo's dancers, everything began to feel different, not just for her fans, but for Lizzo herself, because the woman who once stood so proudly in the spotlight was now standing in silence, and that silence became louder than any of her songs, louder than any of her speeches about love, power, or confidence. The spotlight that once followed her everywhere now felt cold, heavy, and filled with questions no one wanted to answer. People waited for more statements, for apologies, for explanations, but days turned into weeks, and Lizzo seemed to disappear from the places she used to be. The joyful posts on social media stopped, the interviews were gone, the concerts were either cancelled or forgotten. And the woman who once danced with fire now moved like a shadow, hiding from the same world that used to cheer for her. Fans felt lost, confused, and torn apart. Some still wanted to believe in her, to think maybe the lawsuit was fake, maybe the dancers were lying, maybe there was some other side to the story. But even those thoughts started to fade as more people began speaking. Small voices at first, former employees, backup singers, makeup artists, all saying similar things, that behind Lizzo's bright smile and powerful voice was someone who could also be mean, demanding, and sometimes even cruel. And the more they spoke, the more the world started to believe that the truth behind the curtain was darker than anyone expected. The silence from Lizzo wasn't just silence anymore, it was a choice. And with each day she didn't speak clearly or take responsibility, the public started to fill in the blanks on their own. They searched through old videos, old tweets, old interviews, looking for signs they missed, red flags they had ignored. And suddenly, moments that once felt funny or bored now felt uncomfortable. Moments where Lizzo joked with her dancers or touched them during performances were now being questioned. Were those moments really full of love? Or were they signs of a deeper problem? The world began to look at her past with new eyes, eyes that were no longer blinded by fame. And what they saw made people feel betrayed. Because Lizzo wasn't just any celebrity, she was someone people trusted, someone who told them they were enough, who said she was just like them, broken but proud, hurt but healing. And to see her now, hiding in silence while others spoke of pain, felt like losing something real, something important. The damage didn't stop at her fans. Brands that once partnered with her started to pull back quietly. Companies erased her from campaigns. News channels covered the lawsuit updates without the usual music or excitement, and slowly her name turned into a warning. A name that once meant light now brought darkness. A name that once made people smile now made people frown. And even as the legal process continued, with lawyers arguing facts and media reporting updates, the emotional damage was already done, the trust was broken, and the silence only made the mystery worse. Was she hiding because she was guilty? Or was she silent because she was hurting too? People couldn't decide, because the Lizzo they once knew seemed to vanish overnight. And in her place was someone distant, unreachable, and surrounded by questions. And even if the court one day ruled in her favor, the pain in the eyes of her dancers would not disappear, because the lawsuit was not just about law. It was about people, about respect, about truth, and about what happens when someone becomes so powerful that they forget how to treat others. And now, in this quiet, cold moment in her career, Lizzo's future feels uncertain. Will she return and try to explain everything? Will she apologize and ask for forgiveness? Or will she keep hiding, hoping people forget, hoping her fans come back without answers? No one knows, and that is what makes the silence so haunting. It leaves everyone waiting, wondering, hoping for something real, something honest, something human. Because no matter how famous a person is, no matter how loud a voice once was, the truth always finds a way to rise. And if Lizzo has any chance of saving her name, her music, or the love people once had for her, she will have to face the truth, not just in court, but in front of the world that once called her queen and now calls her a mystery.